And welcome back to another episode of Pokemon Knowledge. Now, if you know me by now, you should know one thing. When I get a thought in my brain, there's no way I could shake it sometimes. And I just want to go out at the very beginning of this video and let everybody know I'm not an expert at Magic the Gathering. I'm definitely not an expert in Japanese booster box prices and stuff like that. So normally I don't like to tackle these type of topics, but hey, I have a YouTube channel and I literally spend hours upon hours a week talking about Pokemon, so I might as well talk about these. I'm just going to condense them into one shorter type video, and that's what today's live is going to be, just so I could get my thought processes to keep moving and not have to keep worrying about this one topic. So I guess the first topic we could talk about is just on the serialized cards in Pokemon. And the reason why I think this topic is being brought up, the reason I know this topic is getting brought up so recently is because if you guys are familiar with Magic the Gathering, they have the one of one Lord of the Rings card, the one ring to rule them all type cards. And a lot of people are doing that speculation play on that new Lord of the Rings set. You know, is there going to be a ton of demand to it? What is a one of one card even worth in Magic the Gathering? Because now, Magic the Gathering, people used to always say there's a lot of money in Magic the Gathering and a lot of like higher end collectors, and then people always kind of said that about Magic and then kind of shunned a little bit on Pokemon. But I don't think that's the case anymore, where it's just Magic has a ton of money and Pokemon has very little bit. It's not the same. They're pretty much equal at this point, and you can make the argument now that Pokemon actually has a stronger buyer pool for a lot of these cards. But at least for Magic the Gathering, they got this one of one Lord of the Rings ring card, and people are speculating, can that be $100,000 card? Can it be $1 million card? And these are huge price swings, you know, from 100,000 to $1 million, potentially more. And people say, well, what do you feel about Pokemon? Should Pokemon do one of one or even serialized type cards? And I've actually tackled this conversation in the past. I had Jake from Pokenomics on my live. He was either on my live or on his live, and we talked about that speculation of what if Pokemon would do serialized cards. And my personal opinion, before I get to the prices of what these things would potentially do, first off, I hope Pokemon never has to do serialized cards. I do believe that cheers to Cheval's out there real quick. I'm sorry, I'm just reading the chat. But I hope Pokemon never does serialized cards, because I feel if they ever get to that point, it means they would need to have gotten to that point. And if they needed to get to that point, that means, in my opinion, that Pokemon was probably on the downtrend. I don't think serialized cards is something that's needed, because really what a serialized card is going to do is just create what we really don't want in this hobby, and that is the most true type of artificial scarcity that there could potentially be. And I know a lot of people out there are going to go, whoa, 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 Pokemon's full of artificial scarcity. Yes, it is in a way, especially when you look at trophy cards. People are going to go, no, not even like, you know, the Moonbryons from Evolving Skies. Look at how many packs you got to open for, you know, artificial scarcity and stuff like this. I'll tell you right now, for Moonbryons, I personally can source greater than 20 of those cards. Ironically, I know one person that has like 10 of them, but just as recently as last night, if you guys don't join the Rattle Discord, I really recommend you should. But even during his happy hour chat, one of the people that were in that happy hour chat pulled the Moonbryon earlier that morning. So you could source these Moonbryons, but you know, a one of one type card, you're going to be very hard pressed to start sourcing these kind of things. And if you do source them at that point, you know, the prices for something like that is going to be absolutely crazy. So I hope Pokemon doesn't have to get to that point, because what I feel is happening with Magic the Gathering is really suffering. And seeing all the conversations people are having, you know, seeing prices for a lot of this stuff, seeing how some of their, you know, sets are performing really bad, you know, like the Baldur's Gate scenario and all these. Serialized cards was just a kind of, in a way, an inevitability for Magic the Gathering. Is it an inevitability in Pokemon? Maybe. But I think it would take a while for us to get there, at least not at this point. Now, Pokemon could do the opposite, though. They could just decide to release serialized cards even in this like crazy boom type period we are currently experiencing with modern Pokemon. They could just say, you know what? The Pokemon market's going crazy right now. Let's just insert this one of one card and see how the market responds. I don't think they need to do that. I think Pokemon understands one thing more than anything else is that they are still a TCG, which you can make the same argument with Magic. Like a Magic one of one card is not for the player. And Magic the Gathering, the argument for Magic was always that it was a player's game and not a collector's or investor's game. And serialized cards throw that argument right out the window. The one of one, that's the investor, that's the collector, that's not the player. And if Pokemon does the same thing, they'll get that backlash. If Pokemon needed to do it, meaning if hype started to drop, if people weren't buying, modern Pokemon anymore, if there was no chase factor, if there was no like meat and bones to Pokemon anymore, then yeah, then at that point I would be on the side of Pokemon should probably do serialized cards, but they have no need for it. And then the question becomes, well, what happens when, you look at like other, trading card games, or at least, especially sports, because sports has now have serialized cards forever. Right here in the back, I don't know if you can see it, but that's a Nolan Ryan rookie card. Nolan Ryan, some very easy numbers a lot of people remember as a strikeout record. Nolan Ryan has 5,714 strikeouts in his career. And if you want to watch a really sad video, or just a sad thing to make you really like feel bad, is just watch Nolan Ryan's last pitch. Nolan Ryan's last game, Nolan Ryan's last pitch was not a like exciting thing. He was just in the middle of a game, random inning, and he just threw, and you could tell once he threw, he just had this crazy pain in his arm. You could see the look on his face. The coaches came out, the trainers came out. Nolan Ryan walked off the mound in the middle of a meaningless game with a hurt arm to a first it was to a standing ovation in the crowd, because the crowd knew something major happened to Nolan Ryan's arm, the greatest strikeout king ever. And it's a sad video, and you just know that his career was over. That's a guy who started with the Mets, went to the Angels, went to the Astros, went to the Texas Rangers, and throughout his entire career just continued to be this dominant force in the sport. But even him, so you look at his serialized cards. He's got serialized cards, 1 of 100, 1 of 25, 1 of 50, 1 of 5, 1 of 1s. He has all kinds of different serialized cards, and the prices for those, with all those attributes, he has the greatest, arguably one of the greatest pitchers of all time, if not the greatest pitcher of all time, most strikeouts ever. His cards are still relatively cheap when you look at these serialized cards. So if Pokemon does put out a serialized card, I think the biggest factor in determining value of that is that going to be a one-off for Pokemon. Meaning, is Pokemon on some random modern set going to make a one-of-one Charizard card? And for the next 10 years in the hobby, we never see another serialized card? Or is it going to be a thing where every set Pokemon has a one-of-one type card in it? And because every set has a one-of-one type card, it dilutes that pool a little bit. Now, this is a crazy thing. When I say dilute the pool, that's a stretch, because it's still only like 4 cards a year, really, and then specialty sets, like let's just say 6 on the high end. But when Jake was on, we pondered, okay, if Pokemon put out Charizard one of one card, what would the price be? And then there's all these added layers to it. Is that card being graded? Yes. Who did they send it to? Did they send it to PSA? Did they get a 10? Was a card actually, right out of pack, have a little bit of damage on it? Is it still worth it to get that 8 or 9? Or is it actually a better play to do the authentic play? Because at that point, condition on a one of one card shouldn't matter. So maybe you just need that card in an authentic slab, and because it will still be near mint, it will still be pack fresh, but maybe it won't be a 10 contender. And then the next question was, should you just have a grade? Like, how will people value a one of one in lower grades versus high grades? And then if it is truly an absolute gem mint, like black label contender, do you send it to Beckett? Do you try to get the pristine? Do you try to get that Beckett black label? Because then at that point, if that card comes back to a 9, it brings up the question of, how's the market going to value a 9? Because, and I know what you guys are thinking. On a super high-end card, condition should not matter. But we live in a very weird hobby. And we have examples of cards that are extremely expensive, are not that inherently rare, why they're still rare, like the Illustrator Pikachu. You see what Logan Paul paid for his PSA 10 Illustrator Pikachu. That card still has a total population of 39 is the number that people have landed on for how many of those cards probably exist. And depending on if there's a couple of those cards that sneaked out of the factory in Japan and stuff, and your Pokionos and stuff, and the people going to sell that card, how many could potentially hit the market, who knows. But people, even on a card like that, on the highest end, they still do, chase that number on that slab, that PSA 10. So if you have a card like that, can sell for $5 million, what can a one-of-one Charizard do? The tough part about valuing a card like that is the pool of buyers on that highest event. To be honest with you, it's just going to wind up on who's the buyer on that day. And it only takes two to jack up the price of a card. If you have all your biggest buyers in the entire hobby and their cap for a card like that is $1 million or $2 or $3 million, that's where that price is going to end. But if you have two people that truly, truly want it, if you have your Dubsy and potentially Logan Paul, which is tons of money, it's just going to be those two people at the end bidding that card up. And where it lands, I don't know. That would be an almost next to impossible type card to value. Now, this is the thing. The same as the Illustrator Pikachu, the same as a one-of-one Charizard, even me, I would be a buyer of that card at a certain price. But the problem is where I'm a buyer at an Illustrator Pikachu is millions of dollars difference than the next buyer. And the same thing with that one-of-one Charizard, where I would be the buyer, and the same as everybody in this chat, if the dollar amount for any of those cards are low enough, you become a buyer for that card. The only problem is the realistic chances of the card ever dropping that drastically in price to where it now comes to where we're comfortable buying into that card, honestly, will probably never happen. So I think that's a tough thing about valuing these one-of-ones. And Rudy made a video earlier today talking about one-of-one, chases, and he brought it up the exact same way I would have, is who pulls that card? Is that card being pulled on a live stream by some famous pack breaker, some, YouTuber does Rudy, is Rudy opening it? He says, hey, I'm going to open this one box for myself. Oh, look at that. I pulled the one-of-one, ring card. Does everybody lose their freaking mind? Does everybody call it a scam? Does everybody say it's a fix? Or the next thing is I think the worst case scenario, it's not even a worst case scenario, but one of the crazier scenarios is if that card is never pulled. So people are speculating on those boxes. What happens first when that card is pulled? Do prices of those booster box instantly drop down in price because there is no longer that chase factor, that one-of-one lotto ticket? And then if it doesn't get pulled, do those booster boxes inherently go up in value because of that sealed product play? Because in that 1 in 500,000 chance that your booster box has that one-of-one card in it, and then what happens eventually 5 years now down the line when that card is pulled? Do booster box prices drop? Stuff like that. And then the third factor Rudy brought up, which I think is probably the most likely, especially in Pokemon, we think a lot of people in our little community opening up a lot of modern product and a lot of Pokemon packs. We are not the average consumer. Truthfully, the average consumer and the most product that it's being open is the stuff that's being sold by your big box retails, your Walmart, your Costco's, your Target. Those are the people selling the most packs. And the people that are buying the most of those packs are the moms of the world buying them for their 8-9-year-old son. Now, their son could potentially not even know that a one-of-one Charizard card even exists. And if that is the case, where that kid opens up that one-of-one Charizard and his parents know nothing about Pokemon whatsoever, they just know that he likes these cards occasionally, that some of his friends at school are playing with Pokemon, and he opens that card up, he's super excited, he pulls a Charizard, has no clue that it's a serialized card, no clue the absolute rarity and scarcity of that thing. And then he just sticks it in his binder, or who knows what little kids do with their Pokemon cards, or throws it in his toy box, and then his mom 15 years down the line sells it at a garage sale, and then somebody opens up their garage sale find, and then there's all of a sudden a one of one Charizard. Like, is that a possibility? Yeah. And that's probably the most likely scenario in Pokemon. And if that happens, who knows? Who knows what would happen? Yeah, Alex is saying bicycle wheel ring 2023. Yeah, that kid just takes a clothespin and puts that card in his bicycle tire and makes it sound like a motorcycle. Like, that's also a possibility. So I think that is the crazy thing about one of ones. Now, don't get me wrong. We will be speculating on those one of ones. We'll be talking about those. It will be one of the most famous cards in the hobby just because of how interesting that card will be. But if it never gets pulled, it will always be in the what if conversations forever. And the longer that a card like that goes without being pulled, I think the more hype and mystique and everything that goes with that will just start to surround that card. Where the more speculation that people do, the more like eyes will get, and then eventually 5-10 years down the line, people will like make YouTube videos just talking about that card as, why did we never see the Charizard one of one be pulled? Where could it be? Is it sitting in somebody's booster box on their shelf and it's never going to be open? Like, all these crazy conspiracy theories. Or was it actually stolen out of the back door of the print facility and the person that stole the card knew they had to wait a couple years? And, like all this stuff that would go on a card like that. But realistically, prices for a card like that could be greater than $1 million easily. And like I said, you're just going to need two people to bid it up that high. And it's crazy to think about that a modern card could potentially fetch $1 million in this hobby. And, what are really your most expensive modern cards? Realistically, modern is your trophy cards, meaning every year there's new trophy cards that are handed out to winners. You're going to get, on average, like 3 number 1 cards given out to the 3 number 1 winners, whether it's the TCG or Pokemon Go or the video game. So you're at least going to have 3 of those trophy cards every single year. And those are like that. Those trophy cards still inherently within themselves are a niche of this hobby. And to be honest with you, like every single person in this chat knows what a trophy card is. But the large majority of Pokemon, the large majority of collectors have never even heard of trophy cards in their entire lives. So they don't even know what trophy cards are. Now, set cards, modern Charizards, people know what modern Charizards are. People know what modern set cards are. People know what the Moonbreon is. If you pulled, 1,000 different random Pokemon collectors, varying ages, out of those 1,000 Pokemon collectors in modern, there's going to be like a greater than 90% of those people are going to know what the Moonbreon card is. Now, out of that 1,000 people, how many of those people would be able to identify a trophy card? And if you don't believe me, even on the higher end of collectors, perfect example is Collecticon. You would think people at Collecticon who go to Collecticon events are pretty engaged in this hobby. They, first of all, you have to even know what Collecticon is. Number 2, you have to be willing to pay for a ticket to even enter the event. And then you're going to have money to walk around and look at cards. Look at Dan Ketchmall Collectibles. He had a number 1 Pika trophy sitting literally smack dab in the middle of his case. A greater than $90,000 card sitting smack dab in the middle of his case, surrounded by a bunch of semi-vintage modern cards, a couple vintage cards, but that was the centerpiece in the middle. And you could ask Dan, the amount of people that walked by his booth, the number of people that actually stopped and identified, holy shit, you have a number 1 trophy Pika sitting in the middle of your case. That number was astonishingly low. Being even at one of the events that literally has the most collectors, most engaged, most passionate people in the entire hobby, which is Collecticon, and most of the people that walked by his booth didn't even recognize that card. So that alone kind of just shows you, how these modern cards could even fetch more money just because of sure, how many times do we talk about trophy cards? Not that often. But a one of one card, we would probably find ourselves talking about that card all the freaking time. So that's how I feel about serialized cards. So next, price of Japanese booster boxes. Again, I'm not huge into Japanese product. Where my niche is, I like Japanese promo cards, stuff like this. Just really mass produced Japanese promos. I like the Chinese ones a little bit better than the Japanese right now, just because price points are a little bit lower. And then maybe like a little bit more vintage Japanese cards. Like that's pretty much where I stick around in. I don't deal with super modern stuff. It's not for me. One, I don't ever in the past, I never really enjoyed Japanese product because I was never really familiar with the true rarity and scarcity of the product. And then what I mean by that is I'm not in Japan, so I can't see like demand of product. I can't see how much the local LGS in Japan has. It's just too hard for me to gauge that product. And the only way that I'm able to gauge Japanese product is through secondary market sellers. Obviously, that big secondary market seller being eBay. And I just hate that. I hate having my finger so far off the pulse of what those boxes truly are that I just always kind of stay away from them. But the signs for Japanese product were there for a long time. We've touched on this on other lives. Japanese product, especially with the boom that happened in 2020, 2021, the rise of Japanese collectors, investors, whatever you want to call them, flippers. It's almost like a set after set type thing. I don't know when that's going to stop. And normally, like for the Japanese market versus English market, the Japanese market is just usually a little bit ahead of the English market on overall demand, overall buying pressure in this hobby. And there was a very, very small window of time where I don't know, the hype in Japan dropped a little bit, but it was almost minuscule. Like we're talking about dropping almost nothing. And then booster boxes settled a little bit. You look at like your Shining Star V, stuff like that. Stuff that mainly what happened was reprints kind of hit those things. Even EV Heroes, there was like a very small drop in booster box prices for a very short amount of time just because of that oversupply. But when I say drop, even I'm really going on a stretch to even say that like demand dropped. It's just, I told you, people in this hobby, and I'm sure it's the same as in Japan as it is in America or other places in the country. People only ever want products when they're expensive. The second prices start to drop, that's when people start to get scared. That's the second people say, "Oh, I don't want to buy this stuff anymore." People love to buy their Shiny Star V when it's super expensive. The second that booster box drops in price, that's when people go, "Oh, look, now I'm not ready to buy it." And then it starts going up and they go, "Oh, okay, I guess I'll buy it again now that the prices are going back up." Now, this is the thing. In Japan right now, I've seen photos. People have posted on different Discords, in different, collecting groups, investing groups, trading groups, playing groups, and they're showing the lines at these pre-order events in Japan. Right now, the demand for product in Japan is absolutely crazy. Meaning, I saw lines at like 5 a.m. People started lining up, getting ready for releases of new sets. So the problem is when demand is so strong in Japan that they're going to eat up a lot of that supply, or they're going to allow that secondary market in Japan to become extremely healthy. So then the Japanese sellers who normally ship product overseas to the States and other places around the world, it becomes a little bit more, I wouldn't say taxing, but a little bit more of a headache for them to start shipping all this stuff overseas, when they could easily flip this stuff in Japan, because at that point, that's what they are. People selling product by the cases to Americans, to English sellers, they're flippers at the end of the day. Or people who have just, direct lines of supply from Pokemon or whatnot, and they're able to ship product over to the States. But that is an extra hurdle for them. That is a little bit extra of a headache. So if they have the ability to just sell it to these people in Japan, they will probably do that first. So we're just seeing a bunch of stuff happen. We're seeing crazy supply in Japan, crazy supply over in the States. People, and this is a problem too, is the English market's not helping out either, because the English market doesn't have a good sense on what MSRP prices are for Japanese booster boxes. Japanese booster boxes MSRP is like $40 American. So in, like the States and around the world, most of the product they're opening that English product. So English product, you're looking at like $100 per booster box. So I feel like people have a very hard time separating themselves from things that maybe they are just a little less knowledgeable in, like a Japanese booster box, and they have a really hard time just saying, wait, booster boxes cost $100. I don't understand it. What do you mean this Japanese box costs too much money? I paid $100 for it. And it's like, well, yeah, you paid $100 for it because that's what you think booster boxes cost. But in reality, they cost $40. And people go, oh, well, I can't get them for $40, so I'm going to pay $100. And then, what's going on with, and then there you just start adding these compound layers of like speculation of what's going on with these Japanese game stores, and some of these Japanese game stores buy list prices for a lot of these like waifu cards and stuff. Then you start getting into the argument of, are the Japanese LGSs and the Japanese buyers with all these buy list prices, are these people artificially creating like these prices? And then, because are they just manipulating this Japanese market? But then it goes into that other conversation. Well, if they're manipulating the market, you still have to have a buyer on the other end because they have to be selling that card to somebody. And then you have the people who do the argument of, well, is it just a cultural thing? That's why you could have like some of these Japanese waifu cards selling for so much in Japan, because Japanese buyers just really love waifu cards, maybe a little bit more than, their English counterparts. And we've seen it happen. There's a lot of cards in Japan that the Japanese version far out surpass English versions. But then people say, well, that's not really the case. That has nothing to do with the Japanese culture, and it has everything to just do with the fact that these cards are just inherently rare, that market is inherently just that much stronger. So I don't really know like what the correct answer is for that. I'm just letting you guys know the arguments that people are putting out there. I don't really think that the answer is either here nor there. I think the answer is always what I always say, that the answer always kind of lies somewhere in between. I would say that it's probably like a little bit of a factor of everything. But the problem is as long as that Japanese market is so strong and that they could create high secondary market prices, like for English people in the States, they're going to have a lot of trouble picking up these products for the near term. And I don't see a situation in which these prices start to drop. And I know, I'll tell you right now, one of the reasons these boxes are so expensive are because of your platforms like Whatnot. And then people have said, like, I'm not on TikTok, but people said that there was a lot of TikTok rippers. Recently, TikTok kind of shut that down, where people aren't ripping or pack breaking on TikTok anymore. You have all your Instagram breakers, all your YouTube breakers. And I've seen what these packs are selling for on Whatnot. They're selling for crazy premiums. So these Whatnot sellers, if there's meat left on the bone after the prices they buy these booster boxes at, in order to get viewers to their stream, these viewers are paying crazy prices for these packs. As long as that happens, and until that stops happening, these booster boxes are just going to continue to hold crazy premiums. Now, what do these boxes do in the long term versus the short term? What are reprints going to do to these boxes? Again, I don't know. That's why I don't collect Japanese booster boxes. There's just too many what ifs for me. I don't like the what ifs. At least for like English releases, English boxes, I have plenty of channels that I could go to, or plenty of people that I could talk to, people with distribution, stuff like that. I know what their allocations are. People are very transparent with me. I know what people are paying for booster boxes from different distribution people, whether they're paying $82.50. Some people were paying $86. Some people were paying $88. There was the few people who still had like monster relationships, were paying less than $78. Those people became few and far between recently, but there's a couple people that are potentially even paying like sub 75. That's the question of some of your like P Football Pete's. What are truly their distribution prices when they could order 6,000 cases? Are they 72? We don't know. So, but at least I have a little bit more of a sense of that market, and I can just go on PokemonCenter.com and I can see what's in stock and just like the little things, or go on eBay and quickly identify secondary market prices. So I just feel more comfortable. It's a comfortability thing. That's all it boils down to for English product for me, opposed to Japanese. And yeah, that's about it. So, like I said, I just wanted to touch base on both these topics real quick. We're about 30 minutes in. I'm going to spend the rest of the time just going to go read a couple of questions in the chat, and then we'll probably end the live. So, Old and Bold said, new Lord of the Ring cards look amazing. Pokemon needs to serialize. Ah, man, I already told you I don't think they need to. See, we got Pikachu in the chat. We got number one mod in the game, Drew. Uh, let's see. Fade in Red Sky says number 69 serialized Vaporeon will be the most expensive card. Uh, um, Shug Nasty said, I'm curious if the one of one Lord of the Ring Magic the Gathering card will become a two of one Tom Brady situation also. He's saying, like, what if there's one that works its way out the back door of the printing facility? Yeah, I don't know. That'd be very interesting. I think there would be a lot of explaining to do from a lot of people. Peak the Chew says, question for you, PK. Ultramodern does amazing at Collecticon, as we both saw, versus niche vintage when it comes to volume sales. Do you think this is because of affordability or genuine interest? I think it's a combination of a couple factors. One, so people love high grades. So modern cards inherently grade much easier. You can see what PSA pop reports are. It's actually harder to find cards graded in PSA 8s or 7s for a lot of this super modern stuff, opposed to seeing those higher grades, that 9 or 10. 10 especially. How many modern cards are graded in 9 or 10 is drastically far outseeds everything. When you get to the vintage stuff, it's much easier to find a card, especially a lot of this, like, you know, Watsy stuff, especially base set, Jungle Fossil. It's very easy to find a ton of these cards in 7 or 8 condition. And then 9s actually become a little bit harder to find, and then 10 for some of this vintage stuff becomes next to impossible. So the numbers are so drastically skewed opposed to modern high grades versus vintage. And I think it's just tough for a lot of the people who are maybe a little bit newer to this hobby or just re-entering to really understand, like, that true condition rarity for a lot of this vintage stuff. So they're not really super comfortable with pricing lower graded type stuff. I think that's the first part. And then the next thing is affordability. A lot of this vintage stuff is going to be more expensive. When I was at Collecticon, especially at Collecticon Denver, the cards I saw selling super well, that were super liquid, were high grade PSA 10 cards priced between $30 and $50. Almost everything, as long as it had a PSA 10 label on it and it was, price to move, those cards moved. So I think it's just a combination of it's a bunch of factors. Now, when it comes to the niche and vintage of Pokemon especially, I do believe that everybody who's entering the hobby, given enough time, they will start to dive down the rabbit hole. And I do believe that part of being hyper engaged in this hobby is dealing with that more nichey, more vintage type stuff. So I think for a lot of people, it is just kind of a matter of time. Now, you can have a lot of people that entered, especially recently, Sword and Shield to present. Those people might only ever stick with modern cards. But given enough time, I do believe that people will start to go a little bit more after that chase. So Alex says, I'm surprised the creature deck cards aren't as popular. So I wouldn't say they're not popular. They're just very expensive. You will quickly set. So when you have cards that are anything greater than $1,000, the amount of buyers in this hobby, that number drops drastically. And those creature deck cards, just the way they're released to Japanese Pokemon employees, inherently just that Japanese culture, it's kind of, in a way, this is just me hearing this from secondary sources, but for them to kind of like sell this product is kind of, in a way, a little bit of a shun type situation. But, I mean, shout out to the Green Shiz. I'm pretty sure the Green Shiz bought his creature deck Zapdos. He paid a lot of money for that card. So I think the prices are where they should be with a more niche type product like that. And inherently a creature's deck card too is most people probably don't even know what those are because they weren't like mass produced, but not just mass produced. They weren't publicly available. You had to literally work for Pokemon in order to get those decks. Fat Belly Collect says, I'm a one of one. That's for sure. You are a one of one, Fat Belly Collects. You won that. You won that lotto at the beginning when you were born. Old and Bold said, the One Ring card isn't the only serialized card, but sure, I could see price drops. Fresh Tat says, one of one Charizard first edition with swirl alert. Art patch auto on the blockchain. Oh yeah, he's just checking all those hype dog boxes. Um, doo, doo, doo. Fat Belly Collect says Pokemon wouldn't make a 1 of 1. They would more likely do 100 out of 100. Maybe. Cheval says, I'd argue Pokemon will put out more questionable waifu cards before serialized ones if the interest in the hobby drops. Yeah. Son of a Merc says, is PK a Japanese collector at all? Yeah, I kind of already talked about that. I do a few Japanese plays, but I don't go crazy. Probably more engaged in the Japanese market than the average Joe Smo off the street who's a Pokemon collector. But like I said, I don't even like to call myself anywhere as close to an expert in the Japanese market. The things that I'm really going after is like some more niche-y. We're talking first edition versus unlimited type print runs for some of these like EX sets and stuff like that. That's more where my time is being spent. And then maybe a few of like the Heart Gold Soul Silver, so like that 2010 timeline for Japanese cards. I like to dabble a little bit in that. Mainly just, Nintendo EX Japanese timeline is where I'm kind of dabbling in right now. But even that are just, it's very sporadic. I'm not going hard at it. Alex said, what are your thoughts on the best card / chase cards on the Scarlet and Violet base set? Best, like, personal opinion versus, like, what eBay's doing. If you're just talking prices, I'm not keeping, like, super up to date with the current prices of the raw cards. Somebody messaged me earlier today. They pulled out a pretty good waifu. I don't want to blow up their spot, but they were asking what they should do with that card and talking about like different PSA levels that maybe they should send it if they are trying to flip it. Because right now you have the $15 bulk TCG special is out, but then the value tier is $25, and then that I think it's the value plus tier is $40. Advertised 20-day turnaround times for that value plus. So it's like, okay, but you want to be first to market with some of these Scarlet and Violet plays. That's where you have to start making your personal decisions. Like, okay, you've already made that decision. You do want to grade it. You do want to be one of the first to the market. How much will be left on, how much money will be left on that card after a value plus versus a value versus the bulk tier? Because inherently, we all know this at this point, and hopefully you understand this. There's very few exceptions to this rule. First to market type cards recently in Pokemon sell for crazy premiums. There's a lot of examples of that recently too, especially when you look at before even Scarlet and Violet. Look at the most recent set. Look at Crown Zenith. Look at what first to market Crown Zenith chases did, opposed to what those same Crown Zenith chases are doing right now today. The prices are night and day. We're talking some of those cards have dropped 80% in price from their PSA 10 prices to their current PSA 10 prices, and that's Crown Zenith. Super modern. It's a play. Listen, me personally, I always told you one thing above all others. You should never be grading. Let me real quick change this. You should never be buying modern 10s. You should always be grading modern 10s. And if anybody doesn't know me saying that, I will say it again. You should be grading modern 10s. You should not be buying modern 10s. Don't buy modern 10s. It's way too easy to grade them yourself. But the people that are buying those modern 10s, I don't know today. I didn't know yesterday or the day before, and I probably won't know tomorrow or next week or a year from now. I'll never understand who that person is that pays those crazy prices to get those very first 10s that hit the market. You would think one day that it would have to stop, but it hasn't. Even super, super modern plays like Special Delivery Charizard, mass-produced Pokemon Center promo, the very first 10 sold for $1,000. Look at what 10s in a Special Delivery Charizard are selling for today. In my opinion, still selling for a crazy premium, but far, far away from their all-time high of $1,000 right at release. Who the buyer is of that mass-produced promo at $1,000, I have no clue. I will never know. I'll never know that person. And when it comes to prices on Scarlet and Violet cards, it's going to be the same thing. Next set, just rinse and repeat. And even, people talk down on the Charizard UPCs and stuff like that. Right now, Charizard UPC promos in a 10 are selling for less than $100 a piece. Some of them are selling for like $80, $70 in a 10. Those very early 10s that hit the market were selling for greater than $300. So it's all about being first to the market on a lot of this modern stuff. Anybody who opened a Charizard UPC and graded one promo in a 10 out of the three for $300 made money. Impossible to lose at that point. So, let's see. Oh, God, I skipped to the bottom. Son of a Merc says, I see a lot of people digging the new Scarlet and Violet sets, but I don't know, man. I'm not impressed. But if it follows the Sword and Shield set trend, then it makes sense, I guess. I like trainers, but damn, it's wild out here, yeah. So, Auto Tim 3 said, hey, PK, what are serialized cards? So serialized cards are just cards that are artificial rarity cards, meaning if you have a card of one, it means that only one of that card will ever exist. And if you have a card that's 1 out of 25, those cards are serialized, means you have 1 of 25, 2 of 25, 3 of 25, 4 of 25, and so on, all the way up till you get to 25 of 25. And that's all that will ever exist of that serialized card is 25, and each one of those numbers is individually serialized with, the like that number. So that's all a serialized card is. But like a 1 of 1 card, because there will only be one of that card ever created, it doesn't matter if that set is absolutely massive, has hundreds of thousands of booster boxes sold throughout the country, sent throughout the world. There will only ever exist one potentially serialized card in that set. Now, one of the things that I don't think people are really talking about enough too when it comes to serialized cards is one of the things that we talk about in Pokemon all the time, especially on this channel, is we talk about reprints a lot. And one of the things that reprints really hurt is the possibility of any sort of reprints in the future, because you can never reprint a 1 of 1 card. There is only one. One ring to rule it all. One serialized card to rule it all. So, if you're going to do a reprint in a couple months because that's what the market needs, you can't do it. Or if you do it, and that card's already been pulled, it kind of hurts that set in a way because that ultimate chase has already been removed from circulation. So that's something to take into consideration too with serialized, especially with Pokemon. And one thing that we know Pokemon does do is Pokemon reprint stuff all the time. Now, Pokemon might not always be reprinting booster boxes, but they're definitely reprinting stuff all the time. And we've seen that as recently as every single modern set. You look at what the code cards in, you have the newer Pokemon Live code cards versus the older Pokemon code cards, like the green or white back cards. We know Pokemon is reprinting a lot of this stuff, but they're just not always reprinting it like the way maybe we hope. They're not reprinting it in booster box form. An example would be Evolving Skies. There's a lot of new packs out there of Evolving Skies. You open it up, you got one of these code cards in it, and you do not have that old green or white code card from those first print runs. So So Alex says, PK, what's the 2 of 1 Tom Brady situation? Never heard. I'm not 100% on the information, so I don't want to give out false information. So Trainer Yang says, since we have silver borders now, do you think it will attract more Japanese collectors to the U.S. market? No, I don't think so. I think the Japanese market is just, they like their Japanese cards. Now, this is the thing. There are English collectors in Japan. They're just few and far between. Kind of in the same way that there's a lot of Japanese collectors in America. They're just, in a way, still few and far between, too. Or they're always just a smaller niche of that overall collecting community. Blitz Foray said, saw somebody bring up that Pokemon Company is looking in to hire somebody with knowledge in NFT and crypto. Yeah, that's kind of scary to me. I'm hoping that they're not moving into God, I pray that Pokemon doesn't get into the NFT game. That is not something I'm looking forward to at all. And I just tell you right now, I will not be partaking in the NFT crypto of Pokemon. I'm sure I will become super engaged in talking about it, but that's just not something I want to ever speculate on. But see, this is the thing, you can't even hold me to that, because really that even question like that would be a game time decision for me if I truly actually engage in it, but I hope it never happens. I think probably if they are hiring somebody on, it's probably more for like the TCG, the actual playability of the game, I hope. I know some people really want that NFTs type situation. They really want that one of one type situation for Pokemon, but I don't think that's longevity of this hobby. I think people wanting that aren't truly looking at the longevity of this hobby, where I am definitely looking more at the longevity of the hobby, and I think that NFTs and one of ones hurts that longevity. And like I said, the only way you need to do that sort of ultimate chase is if this hobby really starts to go down the shitter real fast, and it's like Pokemon's last hurrah doing stuff like this in order to gain attention or gain traction. Don't do it if you don't have to. Alex Leal says Pokemon needs serialized cards for collectors or collector rare booster boxes, just like Dragon Ball did with the new sets Power Absorbed. Not familiar with the new set of Dragon Ball, but I don't agree with that. Uh, Andrew Lopez. Oh, hold on. First, Son of a Merc says quality and art put into it. Yes, way better than a Rillaboom, but I don't know. The starter cards just don't do it for him. Give him something more like the new Articuno promo. You talking the new Articuno promo from whatchamacallit? Crown Zenith, like those tins. I really like, if that's what you're talking about, the legendary birds from the Crown Zenith tins. I'm actually a huge fan of the Moltres of those. Andrew Lopez says Pokemon will have to serialize if Magic keeps pushing it harder, and Magic has to so it can make a new reserve list. Why would Pokemon have to do anything? I don't get that. Like, sports cards have been doing serialized cards now for close to 2 decades, and I've never heard anybody use that argument that because sports are doing serialized cards, Pokemon has to do serialized cards. I don't see it. So Shrug Nasty says, Alex, an intended Tom Brady 1-of-1 card had 2 copies authenticated, one by BGS and one by PSA. Both were real, meaning one Slifu and have already been asked about what to do with it. Yeah. Shrug Nasty says, from my understanding, usually more than one copy is printed of a 1-of-1 card for quality check reasons. The copies that do not pass QA checks are supposed to be destroyed. So I guess what happened was they made that 1-of-1 Tom Brady card, and then instead of destroying it, they just said, oh, this will be an expensive card. So Uncle JJ says, hey PK, how do you grade cards? Do you have to pay the $100 sub fee? So when you're talking about the $100 sub fee, I'm thinking you're talking about the $100 like membership fee. So no, you do not have to pay the $100 membership fee, but you do need to understand that when they will do like collectors only value tiers. So like right now, the collectors only value tier is a $15 TCG special. But the only way you could submit cards under that $15 special is if you have that $100 membership. But there is still a $19 bulk tier that is open to the general public. So even if you don't have a membership, you can still submit cards to PSA right now, but you have to pay $19 opposed to that $15. Now, that's $4 difference a card. So if you're sending 100 cards to PSA under bulk, that means the difference between $15 and $19 for you, that's a $400 difference. So it would be worth it to spend that $100, because then even by spending that $100 instead of spending, you're going to actually end up saving yourself $300. So it really is that membership tier worth it for you? It all boils down to you personally. How many cards do you plan to grade a year? If you don't plan to grade a lot, if you only plan to send like 5 or 10 cards throughout the entire year, you're only going to save yourself $40 if you send 10 cards. So maybe it's not worth it for you. Dope3 Pokesnipe says, following your point on the Charizard UPCs, do you always wait for the hype to die down on those products to see where it goes? Are you the one that tries to be the first graders? Charizard UPCs, I tried to be one of the first graders. I sent a couple of those Charizard UPCs away at the $100 tier. I sent a couple away at the $50 tier because at the time, those were the open tiers. I got very lucky that all the ones I sent at the $100 tier, I was lucky enough to have them hit 10s. But the only problem with that play was my $150 tier. I thought my hundreds were going to get sent back to me like a week before the 50s, because a week when you're trying to be first onto market is a huge amount of time, 1 week. The only problem is by the time I got my $100 submission back and my $50 submission back, they came back more or less on like the same day. So it ended up not being worth it for me. So by the 14 cards I ended up sending at the $100 tier, in reality, if I send them at the 50 opposed to the 100, I would have saved myself about $700 on grading fees. While at the time, they were all still selling for premiums in a 10, so it wasn't a bad play. It just, it, it didn't work out the way I expected it to. Why did my $50 tier come back at the same time as my 100? I don't know. But now for Charizard UPCs, now late in the game, when prices started to drop, $80, stuff like this, you could pick up those, where I do believe that there's a lot of people selling Charizard UPCs at a loss. Yeah, at $80, then stuff like that does become a sealed product play. And I think actually right now, if you do want a Charizard UPC, meaning you do see yourself having a Charizard UPC as a sealed product play in the future, but you haven't acquired your position in that Charizard UPC, I think literally today, like obviously you wish you can go back when you could pick them up as low as $80. That timeline has more or less kind of gone by, but if you look around enough, you could still find them between $90 and $100. If you do want that one for your personal PC, like there's no better time than today to pick that Charizard UPC up. Charizard UPCs are going to be the same as any modern booster box. As long as they're still available from distribution, as long as they're still available on store shelves, as long as you can pick them up on Pokemon Center, they will not go up in value. And that's just the truth of them right now. What it's going to take is for that last Charizard UPC to be available at distribution and that last Charizard UPC to sell on PokemonCenter.com. When those two things happen, Charizard UPCs are going to run. And then at that point, everybody's going to be like, whoa, didn't see this coming. And be like, oh, yeah, okay, you didn't see this coming. Yeah. Charizard UPCs are just... And the funny thing about Charizard UPCs is it falls in this weird thing where I think Pokemon Company got a ton of shit from a lot of people when the Celebrations UPCs were next to impossible to get. You know, Celebrations UPCs at release were selling for greater than $200 plus. Like, they never really... Well, I wouldn't say... I know for a fact they never really got to that MSRP, that $119.99. Yeah, you could obviously get lucky. You could pick up those couple drops on PokemonCenter.com, or there was a couple drops. I picked up my one from BestBuy.com. That was how I picked up my one. There was a couple released at like GameStops, but in reality, the prices of those right at release were $200+, and they never drop lower because we never saw reprints of those. We never saw more supply of those. I think Pokemon heard the complaints from a lot of people, so they said, okay, you guys want a lot of a UPC? Well, here you go. And they just printed the absolute shit ton out of Charizard UPCs. And then it was funny. Once people could actually get the product that they wanted, the second they can... I'm just telling you. People don't want stuff that they can get. They only ever want to buy stuff when it's expensive, when it's hard to find. So, and it will happen eventually with Charizard UPCs. Let's see. Let's see. Oh no, I skipped to the bottom again. Let's see. We got Pokenaz says he did first drops for Charizard UPC promo cards. Yeah, that's what I was just talking about. I did talk about it for weeks, but one of the things that I'm still coming to grips with is I guess I always, in a way, feel like a lot of people are familiar with my channel at this point and have watched a lot of my videos, but there are just a lot of people that are just finding my channel now today, which is a great thing. It means my channel is continuing to grow. I'm continuing to get new subscribers day after day after day, which is awesome, guys. And I'm getting close to that 6,000 subscriber mark, which is just, for me, for this channel, is just a ridiculous thought process that people can sit through hour-long chats of one guy just talking to a video camera, kind of talking into what is the void of YouTube. So the fact that people can be engaged enough in a channel like mine, or, you know, we could have sometimes greater than 100 viewers tuned in live to watch these is a crazy thought. So I appreciate you guys. But yeah, there's a lot of hours worth of content on this channel, and it's impossible for anybody to go back and watch it all. I talked about on my last live, you know, I have probably greater than 1,000 hours worth of content on my channel. So even if you sat down like straight out of like a scary movie kind of thing and watched every single one of my lives, like Clockwork Orange type situation where you're in the Clockwork Orange chair and you got your eyes like pinned open and you're watching all my videos. It would literally take 41 days for you to watch every single video. And that's assuming you spent 24 hours a day watching. So yeah. Um, let's see. Uh, Cole Manian said, Pokemon just needs to keep doing what Pokemon does. Yep. Pokemon is doing just fine. Yeah, if you guys ever watch South Park, it's got the James Cameron's quote. It's like one of my favorite South Park quotes. It's James Cameron does what James Cameron does because he's James Cameron. Yeah, I always enjoyed that. It was about like James Cameron raising the bar. It's one of my favorite South Park quotes. Oh, wait, I think I said it wrong. It goes, James Cameron doesn't do what James Cameron does because he's James Cameron. James Cameron does what he does because he is James Cameron. I think that's how it actually goes. Um, Dave Cena said, sports cards are a mess because of numbered cards and variants. Pokemon does not have to change. They're hidden on all cylinders, yeah. And Pokemon, like I said, they are tweaking stuff, but they're just doing like these super subtle tweaks, like silver borders. That is one of the simplest fixes Pokemon did to gain like a ton of hype. And if that's all really Scarlet and Violet does to really separate these generation blocks is doing silver borders, if that becomes like a thing. I mean, I think people kind of forget when you look at look at like a Heart Gold Soul Silver border. Heart Gold Soul Silver borders are very different than, I mean, they do have a different color scheme to them than like just a modern yellow border. You know, I call them like a more goldish type feel to them. So Pokemon has kind of changed borders in the past. But yeah, Pokemon does these real small tweaks, you know, add in silver borders. I think a lot of people didn't like rainbow rares anymore. I think for Sun and Moon, it was something new. It was something special. A lot of people liked them during Sun and Moon. People were really burned out of them on Sword and Shield, and especially with the introduction from after Battle Styles on with all these alternative art cards, alternative V chases. Rainbow cards were still the hit of a lot of boxes. And when people would pull that full art rainbow rare card, it almost felt like you were in a way robbed because you knew that this is in fact a secret rare. This is in fact one of the chases of the set, but it just didn't feel good opening that rainbow rare when you're like, oh, there's a lot of alternative arts in this set and a lot of like cards I would much rather have than this rainbow rare. And I think Pokemon realized that that's how people felt, and they just said, okay, people don't want rainbow rares anymore. No more rainbow rares. Done. That was easy. And I think little things like that make a huge difference. Let's see. Brown CLM said, baseball players who no one will ever know now have 60 plus one-of-one cards per player. Crazy dumb. Yeah, that's crazy thing. And I guess that's one thing about sports that people have kind of mentioned in the past. Like, there will only ever be one Charizard. And Charizard will never get hurt. Charizard will never be a really good player in the minors. And then once he made it to the pros, he was a huge flop. And all the speculation that everybody was saying, oh, Charizard's going to be this great card. And then it just never plays out that way. There's no worry about that. Charizard is Babe Ruth. Charizard is the Babe Ruth. But the only difference is when Babe Ruth stopped playing in 1935 was Babe Ruth's last year after he hit 714 home runs. And that record wasn't broken until like 40 years later, till Hank Aaron hit 755. He retired his career at that. Like, now imagine if Babe Ruth just kept playing. Babe Ruth cards would always be worth money because Babe Ruth, Babe Ruth. And it's the same thing with Charizard. Charizard never retires. He never gets old. And, and you got your Pikachus or your Honus Wagners, and your Blastoids are your Walter Johnsons, and your Venusaurs are your Ty Cobbs. Like, the greatest players that I mean, Ty Cobb retired with a 363 career batting average or something ridiculous. Like, Venusaur's the Ty Cobb, These are the best players that ever lived in the history of the sport. And every set has a new one of these guys in it. So I think that's the difference with Pokemon. So yeah, when you talk about there's a lot of no-name players that have 60 plus one-of-one cards, That's like a whole different type of speculation. Dave Dave Cena said sports cards are in a mess because of number. Oh wait, I already read that. Oops. Um, Coleman said, I hear Pokemon is making a one of one where Charizard is bending Umbreon over a moon and there's a $6.9 million bounty. This true? Question mark. I'm just gonna say it is true. You heard it here first. If anybody could give me the best name, I'm gonna at the end. Everybody give me the best name. What would that card be called? If you got the Moonbreons looking up at the moon, what would be the name of the card where Charizard has Moonbreon or has Umbreon bent over the moon and Charizard's giving it to the Umbreon? Name that card in the chat and I'll read it at the end. I can only imagine what people are going to come up with. Let's see. We got back when you were faceless and just posting meme photos. I guess people are saying when they started watching my channel. Yeah, they said we need 6.99K subscribers. Yeah, so I'm going to do something special when we hit 6,969 subscribers. PokeNaz says, PK, are you grabbing your 2 booster boxes of each Scarlet and Violet set, or are you skipping a little sets? So I don't pick up one of every booster box for Japanese. I only pick up one of every booster box for English, and I did pick up my one of each for Scarlet and Violet. I actually did like a early pre-order. It's like $110 or $115. I think it was $110, and it was the cheapest I found. Yeah, at the time I hadn't seen anybody list them for $110, and then after the fact, Pokemon TCG drops did end up posting a couple websites that were selling pre-orders at $110, but I could just tell what the market was doing. When I do 2 booster boxes, this isn't me really speculating on sets. This is me just getting my positions and being happy with it. Now, if prices start to drop and then I feel comfortable, I see some good buying opportunities, then I'm going to pick up more. Another example of a set that I only picked up 2 booster boxes of was Silver Tempest. Silver Tempest, I never had a good buying opportunity to pick up prices, get booster boxes on the cheap. So I did 2 pre-orders of Silver Tempest. And now a lot of you guys know that I have my second son on its way. He's going to be doing pretty soon, a couple months from now, my second son's going to be around. So when he gets born, then I'm going to have to buy 3 booster boxes of each set. One for my PC, one for my firstborns, and then one for my secondborn. And when people say, like, PK, are you bearish or bullish on Pokemon in the future? I'm like, well, I am bullish because I am putting away 1 booster box of each set for my kids, and I'm not putting these things away in the hope that they go down. I'm putting them away in the hope that in the future they go up. And I do believe my kids will be passionate about Pokemon, or I will have failed them as a father. I always made this joke a lot of times. There are some parents out there who are like the sports parents are super, they are like drive their kids. Their kids end up resenting them for how much they make them play sports, and they, do that. I will be that parent, but with Pokemon. My kid will like Pokemon. He doesn't have a choice of whether or not he will like Pokemon. And in the future, will they still be super engaged in Pokemon? I don't know. But I will tell you right now, one of the things that I'm looking forward to more than anything else is just when my son's old enough to start actually understanding what he's opening, understanding the cards in the set, the polls, stuff like that. I am looking forward to that extremely, extremely high. I did have my son sitting in my lap. We opened up a Brilliant Stars pack. I just pulled out a regular Charizard V-Star card from it. I sent it away to the PSA, ended up hitting a 9. I was crushed. I'm actually cracking that card and resending it to the PSA. And I'll resend that card a million times until it hits a 10. And that'll probably end up being the most expensive graded Charizard V-Star because of how many grading fees I will send it. But yeah, I just want his first Charizard he ever pulled to be in a 10. Call me crazy. I'm well aware of being crazy. Brown CLM said, thanks for the content, PK. Like Rusty said, you need to put out more. Yeah. I try. Sometimes it's tough. Sometimes you kind of either run out of stuff to do or, Pokemon for me is not a full-time job. It's definitely at the end of the day type thing. So, I always want to join Rattle's Tuesday breaks he's doing. Like, again, this Tuesday, Rattle's doing that Moonbreon hunt again. And on Tuesday, he starts at like 6 p.m. And I always want to join his live chats, but I just can't because 6 o'clock, We're just finishing up dinner. I'm giving the son a bath. I'm changing him, putting him in his pajamas, getting him ready for bed. Till like 7:30, 8 o'clock, he finally falls asleep. And then from like 8 o'clock to 11 o'clock, that's my time to package up my eBay orders. And then once I package up my eBay orders, and I could finally, go live, make a video, chat for an hour, hour and a half. So my time, and I talk about this all the time in this hobby. People always talk about money in this hobby, but the most valuable resource anybody has is time. And it has always been that case. Time is your most valuable resource in this hobby. And how you spend your time is completely up to you. And you can spend as much or as little amount of time in this hobby as you please. So, and I find myself spending a lot of time in this hobby. At least I'm always having that mental conversation with myself where I'm always at some way, some form thinking about Pokemon, but it's still able to just go on with my normal day. Blue Rebel says, I'm honestly surprised Arceus isn't more popular considering he is the god. Arceus isn't just the god. He is the god of gods. And then you have, your Palkia, your Dialga, and your Giratina, which are like, Giratina in a way is like the fallen angel. He's in a way like the Lucifer of Pokemon. He's the one that didn't want to listen to Arceus anymore. So what's that famous John Milton book, Paradise Lost? I'd rather suffer in hell than serve in heaven, or I forget the exact line. Man, that's like a super famous line. I'm sure if Pikachu's in here, he'll know that line from Paradise Lost. He's a very well-read type guy. But yeah. Let's see. All right. We finally got people who are going to start naming that Charizard. We got the Dark Boof, Fire Lizard, Face Down, Kitty Moon. Nice. Charizard Level XXX. Oh, that's a good one. Candyman, I like that one. Cheval said Umbreon style. Son of a Merc says Moonbender. Coleman said that card would be a hyper hard rare. Not hyper rare, hyper hard rare. Dark Side of the Moonbreon. Char Hard. First to Moo. Zardy Style. Zardong. Climax Zard. Oh, that's a good one. Climax Zard. Brown CLM said it's hard to listen to PK and laugh at the comments at the same time. Yeah. Pokey Snipe says Rattle's Journey. Rattle is a Moonbreon in that situation. You guys are brutal. Fire Crotch. Oh, that's a good one. Fire Crotch. I like that. You guys are bad. Dark Side of the Moonbreon we got again. Charizard and Umbreon, GXXX, Tag Team Climax. You guys are... Cheval says you guys are dusted. Daddy Charizard. Talk about a tag team. Mason Berry said, bro, PK going live. Oh, yeah, Mason was live too. First, yeah, if people are like, oh, I pray the Arceus. Oh, Flamin'. Oh, God, I can't even read some of these are some brutal ones. All right, fun. I'm glad you guys came up with some really clever stuff. I can't put anything past you guys. But, yeah, guys, this is fun. Jonathan Gonzalez says it was cool to meet you at Happy Hour yesterday. PK, yeah, Jonathan, it was cool to meet you too, man. And I always recommend everybody join the Rattles Discord and join in on the happy hours. I always, like I said, I always get there a little later. I know he starts them at around 7 p.m. Eastern time. I can't usually get there till around 8 or 9, like I just told you, after I put my son to sleep. But when I get in there, it's always fun. Sit, drink beers, chat Pokemon, and don't feel like any of you guys aren't like invited. Like, the best way you could learn about this hobby is not just to like do your own research and all that, but is to be engaged in this hobby and start to like find out how great this community is, because I think that just adds another layer to this hobby as a whole. Is Pokemon is inherently collect and invest in by yourself, but once you realize that there is a community there are people you could bounce thoughts off of, and sometimes you just ask questions as simple as, am I making the right or wrong decision in this hobby? And you'd be surprised at how many people are there to like help guide you because they have your best interest in mind. So if you're making poor decisions, they'll be the first to tell you. And when you make those poor decisions, like if you listen to why they're poor decisions, you don't make those mistakes. And especially when it starts adding up the big dollar amounts and stuff, it's crazy. So, but yeah, if you go look down in the link of the description below, the very first link is the Rattle Discord. I just updated the link, so it should be good. I didn't realize they expire after 7 days. So I have some old videos where the links are probably expired. But in today's video, it is an updated link. So recommend you going down below, look at the description, clicking on that link, joining the Rattles Discord every Saturday night, 7 p.m. I'm there a lot. Rattle's always there. Bounce questions off us or just chat, man. Sometimes we just do stuff as simple as open up packs of Crown Zenith or Brilliant Stars, or bunch of people went Moonbrown chasing last night. Nobody got it, but a lot of people went hunting for it. And then the conversation starts spiraling down, and we started talking about like the D21 Pokeball tins were the ones that had the Cosmic Eclipse packs in it. We were trying to figure out which packs did the D19 balls have in it, and then other balls the D23 in. You know, there was somebody in the chat who had a spreadsheet of every single one of the D designations for Pokeballs, like a personal spreadsheet he made himself. So he's now a great resource if you ever open up one of those tints in the past, or you have one sitting on your shelf in the back and you're like, wait, what packs are in this? Is this Burning Shadows? And then I think there's like Fates Collide and some of these Pokeball tins. Like, if you don't know and you don't want to try to spend 30 minutes on YouTube trying to find random Pokeball tin opening videos where the guy hopefully says, oh, this is D21 or D19, like, you now have a resource. So just real niche-y type stuff. It's always good to have. But yeah, guys, as always, appreciate every single one of you guys. I don't ever ask you for anything. I only ask you for one thing. Hit that like button. Mason Berry doesn't hit that like button. That's okay, Mason. We still love you. But with that said, appreciate every single one of you guys. And as always, I'll catch you.